Hi, everyone. This is Lauren Baker with Search Engine Journal. Welcome to today's SEJ webinar brought to you by iQuanti. Today, we're going to be discussing going beyond ROAS and aligning Google Ads with your true business objectives. With us today, we have Justin Covington, Director of Paid Solutions at iQuanti. Justin, it's a pleasure to have you today.
Thank you for having me. Just a little bit more about myself. As was mentioned, I'm a director of paid channel solutions at iQuanti. We at iQuanti do both organic and paid solutions for digital marketing. I've personally been in the field for about 14 years now. Started at Google in Ann Arbor, where I'm from originally, but now live in New York and work out of our Jersey City office at iQuanti. Nice meeting everyone.
Nice. Likewise. So before Justin gets started, I'm going ahead and go through some housekeeping to let everyone know how today's webinar is going to work. So originally from Michigan, based in New York now. I'm outside of Los Angeles. For those of you that are on already, go ahead and in the chat box, let us know where you're coming in from. It's always really cool to see which states, countries, provinces everyone's coming in from for these webinars. So really excited to get started. Today, Justin's going to be presenting. As you have questions on the presentation, please feel free to ask them in the Q&A box right here in the webinar. After Justin's done, we'll be going through some of the best questions and answering them accordingly and giving you some great knowledge. One of the top questions we always get is whether or not today's presentation is going to be made available afterwards. The answer is no. I mean, yes. Today's presentation, the slides and the videos will be made available to all attendees and registrants. We're also going to have a poll today. It's pretty deep into the presentation, but please go ahead and answer the questions on the poll or the survey. That really helps Justin craft, a lot of the presentation, but also the Q&A, just to really get an understanding of where you're coming in from and how we can help you on that side. And that's pretty much it, except for you will see underneath the presentation, there are some emojis. So in addition to utilizing the chat box, the chat bot, and asking questions, please feel free to hit the smiley face, the celebration, the laugh out loud, heart, love, or raise the roof, clapping hands. I'm not sure exactly which one that is, to let Justin know how well he's doing. And on that note, I'm going to bounce out for a second, hand things off to you, Justin, and then I'll be back for the Q&A. And I'll be also reading the questions for the poll.
Wonderful. Thank you. Okay. Now, is everyone able to see my screen? Should be all good here. And let's get going. So, as I mentioned, my name is Justin Covington. We are going to discuss smart bidding, all aspects of it today. Kind of my own personal journey with smart bidding is that when I was at Google, we were incentivized to get people to adopt it. And at the time, I actively talked people out of it because this was like 2012, and it just was not nearly as sophisticated as it is. But now I've kind of come around to the feeling that it has way more use cases than we previously had. And that's just due to improvements in the product, but also improvements in the ways that we use data and have just learned how to do things differently over time. Okay, so we can skip the little intro about me since we already went through there. Okay, so now we're just going to do a quick start with a quick refresh of different strategies and terms. I know this is beyond elementary for many of you, but I know also sometimes people use different words to refer to different things. So I want to make sure that we are aligned on vocabulary as we go into talking about all of these different aspects of smart and value-based bidding. So of course, manual bidding, that's the classic one. We're sitting there all day, manually toggling bids, looking at CPCs, high level of control, obviously no automation, especially now that enhanced CPC is gone. Then we have automated bidding, which I call anything that is automated, but is only optimizing towards a non-value-based metric. So this would be something like getting website traffic or getting target impression share. And then finally, the one we're going to discuss the most today is value-based bidding. So value-based bidding being any sort of bid strategy that is using information either from the pixel or from your first-party data or your offline data to inform the different ways of bidding. also known as smart bidding. Okay, next. So what is value-based bidding? Basically, it's anything that uses AI and machine learning to achieve your conversion, sales, or lead goals. So the biggest difference between this and other bid strategies, and one of the reasons why I found it more effective, is because it is using different individual signals, like the ones listed on the page, to try and identify what is most likely a time for a customer. So I know myself, I am guilty of regularly buying something on my phone right before I go to sleep. So it probably knows Justin is very likely to buy something if it is a weeknight between the hours of like 9 p.m. and 11 p.m. So having that additional data automates a lot of the things that we previously did. I know early in my career, there was a lot of recommendations around using day parting or day parting bid adjustments or audience bid adjustments. And while other things, if you, depending upon your business type, you can hit like a nice equilibrium, it does not always end up actually working in the long term if there's a lot of dynamism in your business. Move in. Okay, so why use value-based bidding? I've talked about some of those before, but I think one of the biggest areas that we've all matured collectively on is the importance of pixels, the importance of first-party data, and being able to use that to inform how we market both in paid and organic systems. So previously, like maybe when I started, a lot of times you would see people who are retailers or lead gen optimizing towards metrics like cost per click or impression share, which I find to be somewhat useful secondary metrics. But in this day, data is king, as we all know. And if we do not have that correct metric that we are optimizing towards, we're kind of giving up a competitive advantage, is what I'd say. Now, in addition to that, we have more granularity in how we can use conversion data within Google Ads. So previously or early on, sometimes we could only bid towards a website conversion. Now with offline conversions and different ways to pipe in data, like with HubSpot, there are so many different opportunities to leverage that first party data. And if you think about it, at least the way that I view it, is there's no data that's going to be more accurate than the data that you use to like plan and goal your business. So it's best if we can use that to align what's going on inside of your smart bidding strategies. Okay, so now let's just align on a couple of vocabulary terms. You can read them all together. I think the main thing that we want to go through in the next slide is which ones we use for leads and which ones we use for value. So the left side is what we would typically use more for lead-focused clients. Right side is what we'd normally use more for e-com sales related clients. Okay, so in order to set up conversion tracking, we need to make sure that the primary goal is as close to your true business metric as possible. And this is the place where I find when people run into hurdles with smart bidding or value-based bidding, the reason is because they may not have properly vetted the action that they're optimizing towards. Sometimes they may have an action that is based off the pixel, but their business is goaled off of their internal data. So there's some discrepancy between that. Sometimes they're in a field where maybe they don't drive a large number of individual transactions, but each transaction or lead is very high value. So in that instance, maybe we would want to optimize towards an upper funnel metric that might be able to work as a proxy. But being able to have all of those together makes it a little bit easier and in my experience makes it more effective. Next, secondary conversion actions. So these are what I was mentioning earlier. These are metrics that are not set to be in the include in conversions column, and we want to be optimizing towards them necessarily. Things like add to cart, things like page viewers for X number of seconds. All of those can be really, really useful to just track over time to see, is there a correlation between that and our primary metric? Is there any other opportunity to maybe test with a different type of metric? Obviously, we always want to, again, try to optimize towards the closest to the true business value, but we recognize that there are some instances where realities of your business or reality of your marketing require you to use one of these metrics as well. But I call them secondary because they're not really directly led to value. They're more just kind of there along the conversion path. Hey, then finally, for conversion volume, we'd want at least 15 conversions in the past 2 weeks. Although I would say the more the better. I typically what I see is when there is a lower conversion volume, it takes longer for the algorithm to learn and to ramp up. And in some of those edge cases, we may even recommend using other types of bid strategies, and we'll get to that a little bit later. But as I said, the higher the conversion volume, the better it tends to perform. Okay, so now we're going to talk through both of the types for lead generation and then for e-commerce. Just going to take a quick sip. Okay, so we have two approaches, and I will tell you my favorite after we go through it. But we have maximize conversions and target CPA. So the way that I see it is maximize conversions is really good if your goal is just get as many as possible. Now, the reason I don't really like maximize conversions in the long term is because what I've found is usually the bid strategy finds its own equilibrium. And so say you need to scale up by 25%, and obviously there's no loss impression share due to budget. It's simply the algorithm just doesn't see any reason to. I like having TCPA there as a lever that we can pull and push as needed in order to control spend, either going up or going down. And this is just a diagram of how all those things work. We're using the contextual signals, the auction time insights from the individual user, what their actual search query was, and then all of that informs the actual bid that they use for that user. And this kind of contrasts to manual bidding, where really we don't have any of those other signals. We're just saying, hey, everybody is the exact same. Let's throw that manual bid at them, which may or may not work, but I think increasingly is a less effective strategy. Okay, now for e-commerce, very similar on that side. So maximize conversion value is usually what we would launch with. Let the system run for a couple of weeks to figure out what its equilibrium is. And then if we need to get tighter control or looser control, that's where we put on the target ROAS, where we are able to try and get as many sales within our daily budget that will hit our return on ad spend goal. So very similar flow in terms of how it works. But the overall principle is start with the more automated one with as few guardrails as possible in the automated realm. And then once you figure out what its normal is, that's where you may want to put on that additional lever. Okay, so this is a nice little flow chart for choosing the right strategy on which types of bid strategies to use. As you can see, it's pretty similar using maximize value for TROAS. If you're doing sales or profit, if you want leads, then that's where you use maximize conversion value. But I do want to highlight that different campaigns can work differently. And another pitfall that I see people hit is they will try maximize conversions or some other smart bidding strategy on one campaign with one bid if they're using TROAS or TCPA. And if that does not work immediately, then they kind of read it out entirely. The way that I like to think about it is that smart bidding offers way more dimensions on which we can optimize, which does go against kind of the traditional wisdom that we are simply ceding control and making our jobs obsolete by using some of these more intelligent systems. Okay, so now that we've gone through the setup, we'll go through the optimization of everything. Okay, so a couple of true or false questions to start. So true or false, value-based bidding campaigns require little or no effort to optimize. False, while value-based bidding frees us from the manual drudgery of adjusting hundreds or thousands of keywords per day, it allows us to test things that are more impactful. The way that I kind of compare it is I'm from Michigan originally, so big with the auto industry, and people don't realize that we still have a good number of auto plants in the area, but because of the increases in technology, it takes fewer people to do those jobs, but the average skill level is higher because we're not talking just about let's set a bid at this amount, wait a day or two, and then establish that as a new normal. This involves analysis of our first-party data. This requires knowledge of how some of these more smart bidding strategies work, what sort of signals go into them. It's a different kind of testing than we would have done before, and offers us a few different other perspectives on how we can actually optimize it. Next, value-based bidding takes a while to ramp up compared to manual CPC bidding. And this one is absolutely true. And one of the other biggest pitfalls I have seen when people transition. Manual bidding, I would say the biggest perk of it is if you change your bid from $1 to $10 today, you are almost immediately, within a couple of hours, going to see exact change. But on the downside, it's still treating every customer the same. And so someone who's just in the information gathering phase versus someone who really has high intent to purchase, manual bidding isn't going to know any of that. Now, I will still say there are some situations where we may want to use manual, but increasingly fewer as time goes on. So as a recommendation, when you launch value-based bidding, at least allow up to 2 weeks for it to stabilize. Now, during that period, you should be tracking it to make sure that the trajectory is moving in the direction that you want it to. But these really are cars that just start up a little bit slower, but once they go, they're off to the races. And then finally, manual CPC bidding is more efficient than value-based bidding. I would say that one is false, although there may be some disagreements. But in tests that I've done on multiple clients, consistently value-based bidding becomes more efficient in the long run. One of the things that I've seen is we will transition over, and then the client may see CPCs increase by some percentage in the first few days. And because they are trained to think in a CPC mindset, they immediately want to pull the plug. But over time, the hypothesis and what I've seen bear out is that the bid strategy succeeds in driving more overall value. So yeah, you may be paying slightly more in some instances, but the value you get for it makes sense. And if it doesn't make sense, that's where we tweak and optimize that sort of thing. Okay, so now we're going to go into those different optimization levers. Okay, so test bidding towards a new business goal. That is I would say, the most common one that I use with the clients that I work with. So maybe you have a client, their ultimate goal is getting as many people to sign up for a gym memberships as possible. But they're currently only bidding towards people on the website who just fill out a contact us form. So yes, that's useful and that's good information to know, but that's a proxy for what we're actually going for. So that's where we would work with that client to have a data solution where we can pipe that data in somehow, and then instead bid towards that, because every predictive model is almost like you're giving a suspect description to the police, where you're trying to say something like, oh, they look like this, they're the person who's likely to do this. It just kind of works in that way. So the person who fills out a lead form may be somewhat different than the person who actually ends up converting. Now, I will say it'd be very cool if Google shared this information with us about who that person is or all the details around them. But the best we can do at this point is just using the algorithm to reach those customers who are more likely to convert. All right, next, applying first-party audiences to inform value-based bidding algorithms. So as we know, bid adjustments, and really, all bid adjustments do not work with smart bidding. I see that as a plus because it was very frustrating and annoying having to keep track of your time of day, your device, your day of the week, like all of those different bid strategies, or bid adjustments, I should say, could get really thorny to manage on a day-to-day basis. So it is nice that smart bidding allows us to just kind of like takes that over for us, but we can still use our audience segments in both search campaigns and Performance Max to inform the type of customer that they want to go through. So as we're trying to paint this picture of who is this ideal customer, laying on these different audiences helps us figure out and attribute, okay, how much of the traffic we have fits the profile of the customer the types of customers who have already converted. It just makes it a little bit easier to draw those conclusions. And again, I am the biggest champion of using your first party data within paid, because that's what's going to work best for you. Finally, test other AI ad structures. So both the new broad match, every time they say that, it sounds like the new Coke or something. But the new broad match and then responsive search ads. So overall, in like paid search, having worked in this in about 15 for about 15 years, we can clearly see that Google is moving increasingly towards automation. Just personally, as an aside, I wouldn't be surprised if keyword match types go away sometime within the next 5 years. I mean, there's a reason why they changed their name from AdWords to Google Ads. I feel like that was pretty heavy foreshadowing for that sort of thing. But I have found that in some instances, especially in particular for e-com focused clients, broad match plus TROAS has been pretty effective and saved us a lot of time of the hyper manual, extensive, long tail searches that randomly perform well that we figure out from our search terms report and then incorporate into our campaigns. Now, it does still require a tight leash. Google has really talked up this feature. And what I found is you still have to use negatives. You still have to check your search terms report regularly. And it still does not work for everyone, especially if you operate within a niche industry or somewhere that is more B2B than B2C. I've seen less success in those instances. But if you are B2C, it's a pretty good way to go about it. Similarly, responsive search ads. If the bid strategy is building the profile, responsive search ads are building dynamically the message for that type of person, or which type of person is most likely to convert. So having all of those things paired together can work out well. But if I had to pick one, obviously I would choose the value-based bidding. Okay. So just some considerations so that expectations can be set properly. Again, I understand that a lot of times some may be a little bit out of date on their search knowledge. So I always want to give people a little bit of grace. But one thing that I found works really well is just really setting the right expectations before you go into it. So value-based bidding, they are building a model. Just think of it like a Lego set. So it may take longer than manual bidding, but in the longer term, the results are more effective. Sometimes they can take up to 2 weeks. It really depends on your volume. What I found is the larger your daily spend, the faster it tends to accumulate. So sometimes when we're doing a brand new account build, we will overflight our spend in the first couple of days just to get things going and then taper it down once we've gotten the bid strategy to a good place where it's behaving great. Now, from a structure perspective, I know there may be fans of single keyword ad groups out there, probably the fans who are also fans of manual bidding. And as you know, and I know as well, value-based bidding and really all of these new automated tools, not just in Google, but all of the paid marketing platforms, they favor consolidation and broader audiences, and then using different forms of AI and machine learning to pick through that for the valuable aspects. So if you have used value-based bidding on an ad group campaign that has hundreds of ad groups with individual keywords, maybe that's worked out for you. But if you tried it there and it did not, I would encourage you to test it in a more consolidated fashion. This is a thing that I did with a big retail client back in 2020. And we found almost immediate success. And it also helped free up a lot of our time, especially from some of our more junior members, to actually participate in some of the more thought leadership type activities. And then finally, avoid adjusting bids or budget by more than 20% at a time. When you're using value-based bidding, they say that's when it could be pushed into learning if it goes beyond that. Now, I think that's more of a general guideline. I've seen things change differently. Really depends on how much you're spending, how large your budgets are, all of those sorts of factors. But you want to be a little bit more gentle with it, because every time you make a huge change, the system is trying to figure out how much should I change, especially if you increase the budget, now that I'm able to enter a bunch of auctions that I previously was not able to enter. Okay. So just a quick poll. I know there's a poll results in there somewhere. What is your biggest challenge in adopting value-based bidding? Is it that your data infrastructure needs to be integrated with Google Ads? Have you had poor experiences with smart bidding in the past? Is it a fear of losing manual control, which is absolutely reasonable? Or is it some other reason not listed here? And if it is other, I'd love to hear more about that, because I do think that with the right conversations, a lot of times those hurdles can be overcome.
All right. Now it looks like we have quite a bit of responses coming in and a lot of questions, Justin. So thank you so much for sharing these strategies and tactics on value-based bidding. Definitely have a lot to talk about over the next 30 minutes. And with the responses coming in, we have about half have voted already. So I'm going to go ahead and share the results.
Okay.
Any thoughts or insights here? We see good 55% say data infrastructure needs to be integrated with Google Ads. 23% a fear of losing manual control. 19% pretty close, poor experience with smart bidding, and 12% other. Any thoughts there?
Yeah, so the majority saying data infrastructure makes complete sense to me. I think a lot of these changes, kind of the pivot towards AI and machine learning, at least on the Google side of things, happened during 2020 when I think we all were preoccupied with more important things. So it obviously led to a place where people did not revisit and think more about how we should optimize this. It's also something that I've found usually if you have a Google rep, it's not the type of thing that they would bring up proactively, because usually if you are optimizing towards your pixel goal and your pixels good and you have enhanced conversion tracking, they're usually pretty good on that. So that one makes total sense. I would say the difficult part is it depends on your business model. So obviously e-commerce brands that have transaction tracking, e-commerce tracking on their websites, it's usually more turnkey. But if you do deal with leads, especially if you have a multi-stage lead qualification cycle, that's where it can be a little bit tougher because you're thinking more about what is the true value of an individual lead when we know every submission won't lead to a valuable action. So that's another way that we can work around that.
Very cool. Very cool. So I'm going to go ahead and close the poll. And let's get started with our Q&A.
Okay.
So first question, is it worth trying smart bidding if you do not currently import your business data?
So I would say to a degree, maybe yes. I would say lean soft yes. If the metric that you're optimizing towards in Google Ads is roughly similar in volume to what you see in your first party data, then I think it's a pretty good idea. But I've seen instances where Google says maybe twice as many as what's inside of your first party platform. And that's because there could be differences in like returns if your first party data actually factors that in and removes that from transaction value. If you have lead qualifications, that can result in a different number. So if there's a big distance between the two, I would be less in favor of it, but I still think it's something that would be worth investigating.
Nice. Very good. Next question that comes in is, I've tried smart bidding, but it totally tanked my impression share. Is it possible to use smart bidding without damaging overall visibility in the SERPs?
So I would say when I at a previous job, I transitioned all of our accounts into smart bidding, and that was the biggest concern of most of our clients. Now, what I found is that in most instances, it did not tank impression share, and in many instances, it actually improved it by using that spend more efficiently within the same fixed budget. But I would challenge most people. Let's put impression share firmly in the secondary kind of KPI bucket. It is something that is useful, but I think it's most useful for maybe core brand keywords and core brand campaigns, like your exact like core brand term is the only area where I still use manual sometimes, just for specific control reasons, sometimes client preference. And it's one of the areas where you get the smallest lift from smart bidding. So it's not an area that I'm bullish on. you'll get a much bigger lift off of non-brand and shopping in PMAX.
That's interesting because that's a nice transition into the next question. Heather asks, I understand the value of smart bidding for non-brand, but brand doesn't appear to make much sense. Do you always recommend applying smart bidding to brand campaigns as well?
Yeah, so let's break it down into more buckets a little bit further. So for non-brand, yes, I think most people are aligned on that. It tends to just work better. What I found is your core brand campaigns, or at least this is how I organize campaigns usually, which is just your exact match version of your term. That I think there's very marginal lift. And so I usually wouldn't press on it, but I have seen it work successfully and maintain or improve impression share. But I
Nice.
also see an in-between category that I call brand plus. So this would be your brand term versus combined with one of your products. So maybe you're a clothing retailer, and so it's Justin shirts, Justin pants, Justin something like that. All of those other ones, sometimes those have a higher lift off of the smart bidding than using traditional manual bidding. So that's how I would typically go about it. For manual bids, or for your core terms, you can use it or not use it. It's not going to ruin your day. There's more of a lift when you use it for your brand plus terms. And then obviously for non-brand and shopping, that's where it really gets to work its magic.
Interesting. What about as the consumer is further down the buying funnels, making that final decision? Say, for example, brand reviews, or maybe if you're a supplement, brand side effects, something along those lines.
Yeah, so I think that's one of the beneficial things of smart bidding, the factors that it takes into account. So all of those auction time signals, but also what the user is searching at that time. So it understands to a degree that someone looking for reviews is probably not likely. They're not me at 10 p.m. before I go to bed. They're not about to click purchase. So it can understand. And if your goal is maybe a very strict ROAS, it's going to either bid very low on that person or sit you out of that auction in favor of somebody else who is more likely to convert.
Got you. Makes sense. Panda asks, I'm aware that Google controls consumer finance ads. Is it feasible for VBB to address this issue?
I would need a little bit more context around what's meant by control. Now, if they do set certain limits, I know there are certain industries, things like Google Grants, where they are restricted in the different technologies they use. So obviously, if the policy doesn't allow it or the ad type doesn't allow it, then that's just kind of how you got to deal with it at the end of the day. But yeah, that's one I'd not heard of, so I'd have to get back to you on that one.
Okay, so Panda, if you have any more insights into that question, please feel free to drop it, and we'll revisit a little bit later. Anand asks, this is interesting. Do you see any issues with targeting ROAS or CPA if the user does not consent to the overall cookie policy?
Well, if the user doesn't consent to the cookie policy, I would assume they would be taking measures not to be cookied. So already in the current landscape, if you're using Safari, that cookie is deleted within about 24 hours. I believe it's refreshed every 24 hours. There's also like a myriad of other ways, but I believe at this point as well, and obviously it differs by region. I believe the EU is the most specific on this, but even certain US states like California have guidelines around this, but they have mandatory pop-ups to tell you about what data is being collected. And so a user can opt in or opt out of those different types of setting. And that's not even going into Firefox plugins and different things that you could use if you want to go down that route. But to that point, a lot of how all of the platforms are moving is less so around cookies. Now, Google just finally, after years of delaying it, said they're no longer going to change their cookie policy to match Firefox and Safari. So they're going to maintain it as it is. The privacy sandbox is no more. But all these different platforms, I would say, especially Google and Meta, what they're trying to do now is less of matching based off of cookie and more of matching based off of account, be it Google account or Meta account. And because these platforms all have so many different properties, most people have a YouTube account, most people have some sort of social media account. So they're kind of matched through one of those as well.
Got you. Really interesting. Next question comes from Tom is how much would you recommend an account spends per month in order to run value-based bidding and broad match?
So that is more of a tough question. I would say, to reframe it, I feel like if you are currently using, I would use the same budget that you are currently using, but shift it to a smart bid strategy. So whatever you're using now, I would just change that one variable and shift that. Now, if I'm thinking a little bit more, I would say you should at least be spending, let's give an example for an individual campaign. I would say you should at least be spending somewhere around $500 a day. But again, it really varies. What's the average value of your product? What's your typical AOV? If you're only selling things that cost $2 or something, then obviously you can get away with a much smaller budget. So you really have to factor those things in as well.
Good. So bridging from e-commerce into demand gen or lead generation, Rodrigo asks, for lead generation campaigns focused on the B2B niche, where the average number of weekly conversions is, say, 3 to 4, would you use maximized conversions or TCPA, or would it be worth testing other bidding strategies?
Yeah, so if it is a niche, I would lean towards maximized conversions. The reason being, the volume of conversions you're receiving is just not ideal for using any sort of TCPA. But this is also an area where you may want to try optimizing for an upper funnel metric that potentially has more value. So if you do have add to cart data or form fill out data, if that is well over that conversion minimum, those are the instances where I would maybe say it's worth a test. I've actually seen that be effective before for a past client, where instead of optimizing towards them booking an appointment, there was a different like click event action that we optimized it for instead, and it ended up getting us much more volume and actually converting. So
Excellent. Chad asks, how does switching from maximized conversions to target CPA affect the algorithm? Does the target CPA algorithm ramp up more quickly because it already has some data from maximized conversions?
So yes and no. Thank you for asking this, because this is a really good point. So yes, in the sense that when you have that conversion data, it does make it faster because that individual campaign already has learnings. Now, to zoom out for a brief second, Google has been saying for the past year or two that you could technically launch a brand new campaign in an existing account with smart bidding or with target CPA or target ROAS right off the bat, no problem. I have personally not seen that work as well, which is why I tend to prefer using maximized conversions. Now, with target CPA, the reason why I'm very happy you asked this question is what I have often seen happen is someone switches from max conversions to target CPA, and then the spend and traffic immediately goes off of a cliff. And so the conclusion from that is target CPA does not work for me at all. When really the only conclusion that we can draw from that is target CPA at the specific CPA bid you set does not work for you. Sometimes it needs to be much higher, sometimes it needs to be much lower. And that's where you'd have to do additional tests and tweaks, kind of just like what you would do with manual bids, but just not for every individual term, in order to see which works best for you, what that sweet spot is.
Great, great. The next question comes from Mitch. Mitch asks, what are your thoughts on using asset groups with different audience targeting under one PMAX campaign? Will it improve efficiency tailoring the ads to a specific audience, or will the segmentation mess too much with the machine learning?
So this is an area where I think it just makes sense to balance and find a sweet spot between how many you can have within an ad group or within a campaign, and what kind of those differences are. So one, I'm very happy that I remember the days when we only had one asset group per PMAX. So I'm glad we're out of that and now have more individual reporting on those as well. What I would say is if they are thematically similar, then yes, I would put them somewhat in the same group. So if it's all, say, say like t-shirts, but like different varieties, but roughly within the same price point, having different asset groups can be great because obviously you may want to show a different type of visual or video element that goes along with that specific product type. But if you have like athletic shirts, but also tennis balls in the same Performance Max campaign, I don't really think that would be a very good way to use it because they're not thematically linked in that way to build a model. And again, the way that I always go back to thinking about it is if I put these structures within this campaign, what is the picture that the smart bidding strategy is going to come up with? So I want the smart bidding strategy to say, I want someone who is looking for a shirt. I don't care which variety of shirt, just one of those shirts. They can go after shirt guy. But if you say shirt and tennis balls, they're like, that might be two different guys. Maybe it's the same guy sometimes, but you don't want to put it in different directions.
Gotcha. Very good. Let's see here. One moment. I don't think I asked this one yet. How does switching from maximized conversions to target CPA affect the overall algorithm? Does a target CPA algorithm ramp up more quickly because it already has data from maximized conversions?
Oh yeah. So for this one, it does. You do ramp up faster because you have historical data, but it's just giving you that manual control. And that's the other part of this I wanted to mention. I still, for those who were dissuaded from using it because they don't have manual control, you still have manual control. It's just automating a lot of the things that you were doing before. So you're still doing the dishes. You just don't have to do the part where you hand wash every dish. You still are selecting which cycle, what sort of detergent, and those are still things that you have control over. You just don't have to get your hands as dirty.
Nice. Makes sense. And thanks for the analogy.
Thank you.
Pile of dishes in the sink I need to take care of later. Albert asks, are there situations where you would pivot to manual CPC building after being on an automated bidding strategy to quote unquote reset the learning? Or do you think it would be more promising to scrap the campaign completely and start a new one from scratch?
Yeah, so I've had this scenario happen before, and the more effective thing to do in my experience would be to reset a campaign to not reset, to create a duplicate new campaign, a new version of it. And it can be as simple as literally edit, copy, edit, paste, because Google treats each campaign as a distinct entity. So you would still be having the same structure. You wouldn't have to deal with like manually updating and creating everything, but to Google, it would be brand new. And so I would find that to be a little bit more effective.
Got you. This is a fairly broad question, but Kerwin asks, how do you know how much you bid through TCPA?
Okay, so this is a good question, and you're probably not going to like the answer, but it's more of an art than a science. So the way that I like to think of it is first using historical data. What has our CPA typically been for that individual campaign? That's one aspect that I want to look at. The second is, what is our daily budget and how does that relate to our campaign? So obviously, you would not want a target CPA that is a dollar amount that is higher than your daily budget. That would just not work. It would not spin. So you'd also want to consider that. One other aspect that I found that I didn't mention earlier is that they tend to work better. Smart bidding strategies tend to work better when they have a little bit more headroom. So in some instances, obviously it depends upon how much latitude you have with budget. But in some instances, I will increase whatever our daily budget regularly is by about 10 to 20%, just to give it a little bit more breathing room in instances where it's not spending at all for the TCPA that we have, just because you want to make sure it's there. But same as manual bidding in a sense, there is an element of guess and check. The difference, I would say, is the evaluation period. For manual bidding, you used to set your bid today, you would have a full day at the new bid tomorrow, and then the day after, you'd be able to kind of say, yes, that was good. No, it wasn't as good. Now, you kind of set your TCPA bid. You allow that to run, ideally 2 weeks, but we understand business realities. So I usually try and look at things within a 5-day period to see what direction is it moving in. I found they are most volatile when they start, and then as time goes on, that's where they start to be more stable. So you'd still want to give it a little bit more evaluation time, but the answer is you kind of got to guess and check. Another thing I will say is that I have found that, and this is a really important aspect of the having your business data in there. If you are optimizing towards a pixel conversion in your account, but the business data is defined differently, or maybe uses like qualified leads or all sales minus returns, something like that. What I found is sometimes your TCPA bid should be higher or lower than that number. They don't necessarily have to be the exact same, and it doesn't have to be the exact same as your goal, because functionally, the TCPA is just what you're telling Google how to go after someone. As long as the result of that campaign is the ultimate CPA that you would want, I would say put whatever as your target CPA that will allow you to accomplish that.
Nice, nice. So Justin, you are a wealth of knowledge when it comes to bidding on Google Ads. Do you have time for a couple more questions before we wrap things up?
Yeah, let's do it.
Absolutely. So Dominic asks, let's say you have $10,000 a month to spend in Google Ads. With value-based bidding, is there a general guideline you, Justin, that you would recommend for the number of campaigns and ad groups? Dominic knows it is hard based on keyword cost, but just in a general structure perspective.
Yeah, so when we're talking about value-based bidding, what I would say is, one, your campaign structure should be informed by your website structure. That's kind of my ultimate thing. And we've been talking all day about bids today, but let's also remember that an important part of the auction is your ad quality, your quality score, expected click-through rate, ad relevancy, all of those factors. So if I have a website that sells shirts, shoes, and pants, I would probably want to have at least 3 different campaigns for shirts, shoes, and pants, because I would see those as 3 distinct kinds of customers. So that's how I would go from a structure perspective. Now, in terms of how I would allocate the 10K, if this is, well, let's theorize that this is a brand new account, I usually set things one in one of 2 ways, depending upon their business goals. Either we set everything up the same, so we would split that 10K between 3 or 4 campaigns or whatever to be as even as possible with budgets, and then obviously adjust them based upon results. The other way is looking at the percent to total that that campaign or product type contributes to the overall marketing transaction revenue, and say shoes only contribute 20%, then I would probably launch with 20% of our budget and use that as a starting point. Obviously, you're going to have to tweak. The one thing, the sense that I'm getting as well from this one and some other questions, is a lot about the setup. And the setup is important. I mean, I went over a lot of stuff about the setup earlier, but it's also important to know that the iteration is where you usually truly see the lasting success. So you can take your best educated guess to start, but once you go from there, then you want to try and think, okay, should my bid be higher? Should I try a different action? One of those more advanced optimization techniques.
Excellent, excellent. And our final question of the day comes from Jason. This is an interesting one. Jason's boss is an avid proponent of manual CPC, but has recently been open to integrating more automated business bidding campaigns. Is there a strategy you would recommend to migrate current campaigns to automated bidding so as to not lose traction from the current manual CPC campaigns already have?
Got it. So I have been in this scenario when I migrated all the accounts over to smart bidding at a previous job. And what I found to be effective is I go a middle, bottom, top approach. So I usually, for the first campaign that I transition over, I would pick a campaign that's right in the middle. It gets an average amount of volume. It gets an average amount of conversions. It should be a campaign that if it were to tank, it would not ruin your business. It would not set things on fire, but with enough volume that it has room to succeed and show actual value from switching to smart bidding. So that's kind of the first aspect. But the second one I would look at too is you want to make sure that you have the right structure that works with it. So if you're currently in a very like granularized single keyword ad group type structure with manual bidding, I can almost guarantee that's not going to work well with smart bidding. Sometimes I've seen it work, but in most cases I haven't. So that would also require a restructure of that campaign to be more consolidated in order to work better with the smart bidding.
Gotcha. Thanks so much. For those of you that asked questions in the Q&A, we didn't have a chance to get to them today, we'll be following up with you post-webinar. And with all of the information that you just dropped, Justin, I'm sure you have much more to be able to do so. So thank you so much to you and iQuanti for working with us on today's webinar. Where can folks find you online, and any parting words about iQuanti as well?
Yeah, I mean, you can find me on LinkedIn. My name is Justin Covington, iQuanti, iQuanti.com, if you'd like to check out more of what we have available. And like I said, iQuanti, we are a global team. We have expertise in paid, organic, analytics. So a lot of the things that we touched on today are areas that we would be more than happy to help you out with. So don't hesitate to reach out if you'd like to have that conversation.
Excellent. Well, thank you again, Justin, and thank you to the team at iQuanti for making today's webinar possible. Again, lots of great information. Learned a lot on the bidding side, especially with value-based bidding and all the different types on the Google Ads side. And again, really appreciate your time today. And we have a lot of positive feedback from our attendees. So again, thank you so much for sharing this great information with us and with our audience. Thank you very much.
It's been a pleasure.
Awesome. Have a good one.
You too. Bye-bye.